Welcome back to the Kyero Pro Podcast, the penultimate episode of Series 2, where we've been talking about all things AI. I'm joined by Alfredo Bloy-Dawson. Say hello to the people, Alfredo.
Hello, everybody.
And our guest this week is Sharon Collier, a change management expert. Sharon, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people about what you've been up to?
Thank you, Martin. And hi, it's a real pleasure to be here. So at the Leadership School, we work with organisations across multiple sectors, teeny tiny organisations, big global organisations, and we help them deal with change, particularly from a leadership perspective, and look at how do we equip our people to be able to deal with change a little bit more easily, more enjoyably, and ultimately achieve whatever it is that they're seeking to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got a feeling we're in the right place with the right people. So in this series, we've been talking about AI and looking at what it means for estate agents in Spain. And we started this series with three broad assumptions. The first one is that the AI genie is well and truly out the bottle. It doesn't matter whether we like it or dislike it. It's not going back in and it's not going away. The second assumption is that you can't automate a process that doesn't exist. If the process is only in your head, AI helps you not at all. And the third assumption is that the person currently running your processes or currently running your automation is the expert in the room and the person most threatened by what AI is bringing to the table. And today we're wrapping up the series with Sharon, who's very close to this idea of what change means to individuals and to a business. So Sharon, with your change management hat on, what do you see happening to small businesses in terms of the changes involved with what's going on with AI at the moment?
Yeah. So I guess AI is one of those unique topics in that it impacts everyone. Like it's not obviously industry specific, it's not geographically specific. It hits every organization. And what we see with our clients is that they are already dealing with a huge amount of change. And that level of change isn't new. That's obviously been going around for forever. But I think what is new is the complexity and the volume of change. So there's a lot of change going on. There's changes in markets, there's changes in geopolitics, there's changes environmentally. And then what we're doing is layering AI on top of that as yet another layer of change that organizations are having to deal with. And that, the topic of AI is so huge that it will impact on an organizational level. It will also impact on a team level and it will impact on an individual level. And what we see some organizations doing is look at it and go, okay, that's too big and scary. And that's too complicated and that's too difficult. And so they just put it over here in that I'm not sure how to deal with that bucket. And obviously the danger is that if you don't face into AI, then you get lost behind, and you get lost behind from a competition perspective, i.e., are you losing clients because you're not embracing AI? Are you losing in terms of productivity? But also, are you losing in terms of the way that you attract your employees? Because particularly for kind of early career individuals, they will come into an organization expecting it to be AI savvy. So what we see is this dilemma between, AI does feel complicated and big and possibly scary, but not facing into it is not really an option. And we see organizations kind of struggling with that a little bit at the moment. And which I guess is where people like us come in, because it doesn't have to be big or complicated or scary. There are some really simple things that you can do to help embrace AI.
Well, that's interesting. There's a really interesting perspective about the different layers of change that go on and how the layers are kind of stacking. Do you think AI is a different beast altogether, or is it just happening so quick it looks different?
So this is my personal opinion, and looking at the clients that we're helping and supporting, I think AI is a wicked issue. Okay. And a wicked issue is a kind of formal definition from the world of complexity theory. a wicked issue is any topic that is so complicated, is so multifaceted, that there isn't one solution. There isn't one action that you can take. There isn't one kind of, oh, well, if we do this now, that will be it. And therefore, it needs a different approach. So this is not traditional change. This is not where a leader stands up and says, okay, so Martin and Alfredo, I want to change things in the organization. We're going to achieve this amazing thing. And I talk about the vision and I get you on board. AI is not like that. Because of its complexity, because of the lack of vision, the ultimate truth is we don't know what AI can do because it is so powerful and so incredible. So it is a wicked issue in that you can't use that traditional approach to set a compelling vision. But what you can do is take a slightly different approach that makes it more manageable. The first thing that I would always say to somebody is zoom out and then zoom in. So zoom out and see the whole picture. What is it you're looking to achieve here? Even if you don't know what that kind of shiny vision is at the end, let's just step back a minute. Let's look at the whole picture of everything that's going on. What as an agency do we want to achieve with AI? What's important for us? What's important for our people? What's important for our clients? And you're honest about that without any judgment. No kind of waggy fingers. Well, our employees should be taking this on board. Let's just put the waggy fingers away. Let's be honest about kind of, all right, what is it we're looking to achieve here? And then you zoom in and you get specific, because I think sometimes the language of AI isn't helpful because AI is so big. So specifically, what is it that we want to achieve? Is it that we want to trial having a virtual assistant that takes our initial inquiries and helps us turn them into warm leads? Is it that we want to use AI to automate some of our work streams and some of our processes? Let's get a little bit more specific about what it is we want to achieve in our agency, and that can make it more accessible and therefore easier for people to engage with.
How should business owners and leaders acknowledge and work with it rather than pretend it doesn't exist, Sharon?
Oh, such a brilliant question. So I think for leaders, particularly those who may be a little bit less confident or don't have quite so much knowledge or experience in the change field, you want everybody to be on board, right? You want everybody to be enthusiastic. And so the danger is when you have resistors, when you have people saying, well, that isn't going to work, because the temptation is to shut that down. The thing I would say is listen to the resistors, listen to those people who are saying, well, hang on a minute, you haven't thought about that. And how does that going to fit with that? And what about this? And I'm concerned about that. So the role of a leader is to create space for those conversations to take place rather than ignoring them. And sometimes that will be people having a bit of a rant, and that's okay. We're talking about human beings here. We're not talking about employing robots. So listening to those emotions, and actually creating space by asking some curious questions. So that might be me saying, well, okay, what are the concerns? What concerns might our clients have? What concerns might X or Z or Y person have? So that I'm creating space for all of those concerns to be aired and listened to, and then acknowledging them. I can't necessarily do something about all of them, but let's acknowledge where the concerns are. And within some of those rants, there are probably some really important watch outs or some really important pieces that as a leader I might have missed.
That's really interesting. I've been furiously making notes, and I think it's worth having a little recap before we carry on. I love this idea of a wicked issue. That kind of gives me permission to struggle with it a bit.
100%. Yeah, most definitely. And I think anyone who believes that this is easy kind of needs to have a little bit of a reality check. It is big, it's complex. Let's not apologize for that. Let's not try and sanitize it or pretend that it is anything other than that. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it will always be difficult. Yes, you're right, a wicked issue, can fry your brain a little bit because you need to get your head around it. But as a leader and as an employee, I don't need to get my head around all of it. I just need to get my head around this bit of it. And then maybe tomorrow or next week, when I've got my head around this bit, I can get my head around the next bit. But I completely agree with you, Martin. Acknowledging discomfort and sitting with discomfort and going, "Ooh, this is a bit tricky, isn't it?" And I don't say that flippantly. It is a really important thing to do.
And it's the opposite of what we're presented with on social media is some AI guru saying, "I've got the answer." And that kind of leaves me feeling, I don't even know what the question is. So acknowledging the wicked issue I think is really powerful.
Yeah. And with wicked issues, there are no silver bullets. And if somebody's trying to sell you a silver bullet, you need to be a little bit careful. And also because the wicked issue won't be the same for two agencies. Obviously in your podcast, you've talked to some brilliant agents that are using AI fantastically. And you want to pinch with pride. You want to take those learnings from all of those other agents, but it is likely to feel different in your agency. So to sit back and think about, right, what feels right and appropriate for us, and then work through that step by step, taking an emergent approach.
A couple of episodes ago, we spoke to the guys at High Homes, and they had a really good way of talking about the changes that AI could bring in their business. And they presented it to their staff as taking away the paper cuts, the annoyances. So they normalized it, and they were really specific in the things they were solving. And I thought that was really powerful.
Most definitely. So if we think about change, the thing that people forget sometimes is the transition space between what I'm leaving behind and what I'm going to. What you've just described is an agency that recognizes that transition and helps me understand what it is I'm letting go of. And in that example, what I'm letting go of is some of the stuff that, quite frankly, irritates the hell out of me. So that already makes me feel a little bit more enthusiastic because I'm like, oh, all that boring stuff potentially is going to go off. The thing that has to happen then is help me understand what it will be replaced by. And that's the bit that sometimes people forget. So you're taking away some of my paper cuts, some of that boring administration stuff. But what's going to be there in its place? What can I get excited about? How am I going to add value? Because that's, you're taking away part of my job there. So, okay, that's great, because I didn't really enjoy it much anyway. But what are we replacing it with? So that's the other bit of it to kind of think about.
Yeah, we've definitely, being somebody who's excited by new things and not so enamored with the old things or doing anything twice. I think it's easy for entrepreneurial leaders to imagine that everybody's delighted to let go of the old boring stuff. And I think people are, when you give them the opportunity to see what's next.
Exactly.
And we've made that mistake of just going, hey, let go of this stuff, and then we'll go over there. And of course, not everybody's motivated the same way.
No. And also some of that boring stuff is comfort zone stuff for me, potentially, because that's stuff I've been doing for years. I know how to do it. Doesn't take a lot of brain kind of power for me. Quite enjoy doing it in a kind of like odd way because I can get it done, kind of tick on my list. So acknowledging that even if I said it was boring, it might still be comfort zone for me. So if you're taking it away, like we said, what are we replacing it with?
Yeah, good point. Two other points I wanted to summarize. I'll need a summary of the summary if we carry on like this. I liked the idea of zooming out and zooming in, zooming out to go, actually, what are we trying to achieve? And then focusing in on a tiny bit that we can make a small change, a small, relatively easy change, probably. And I love the idea of listening to the resistors, the idea that they're not just annoying. There's probably a grain of wisdom in there resistance.
Yeah. And if you have silent resistors, really thinking about why are they silent? What is going on there? Particularly if you've got members of your team who are normally quite vocal, and all of a sudden they go quiet, or there's a lot of nodding and a lot of but you're not quite convinced that somebody's on board. And people go silent for a variety of reasons. Sometimes that's because they're scared. Sometimes that's because they're being loyal to something that's happened in the past. So lots and lots of reasons. But as a leader, if you have silence in your team, you've got to start asking yourself, okay, why? Why is that? Because as a leader, what you're looking to harness and embrace is diversity of thinking. It's never helpful in any team to have one line of thinking. And it's certainly never healthy to have a team who only ever agree with you. So, if I'm a leader and I have members of my team who have gone quiet on me, then I've got to be having a quiet one-to-one conversation with them, or helping them, providing space for them to air what is really going on for them. What are their real thoughts and feelings? And you can have some real fun with that.
Alfredo.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and in this whole idea of adopting the thought process as a leader to do with this AI conversation, how, as a leader, do you address the issue of likely suspicion from your team that your motivations are purely financial, and that you're unlikely to say, "I'm going to take this boring work off you, but pay you the same and expect you to do less work"? That has to be surely some of these silent detractors that don't want to say it but are thinking it.
Yeah, 100%. So there are two things I would suggest there. I would face into it, and I would answer that question. I would, talk to the team about, yes, financially there is going to be a reward for me or for the agency, but also there is benefit for you, and let's face into that. There's something called WIFM. What's in it for me? And that's one of those things that leaders sometimes forget, and they talk about the benefits to the organization. Our agency will benefit by this, or our clients will benefit because of this. And what they sometimes forget is, but what's in it for me? If I'm a member of that team, where's the benefit to me? So as a leader, you've got to work a little bit harder sometimes to say, okay, Sharon, for you, this is the benefit for you. It's going to open more opportunities. You can get involved in this other work over here. So that would be the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is, if you genuinely think that there are questions that are not being asked, then use some type of anonymized system to get those questions submitted to you. So, if you're physically together, you literally have a box. That's the old fashioned way of doing it. You have a box in the corner and you get people to put questions in. If you're working remotely, there's all sorts of ways that you can do it using kind of anonymized notes and things. But you want to be surfacing those questions so that you can legitimately and honestly deal with them. And I think the honesty bit is really important here. We can all detect somebody at 1,000 yards who is not telling the truth. So as a leader, if you don't know the answer, then it's fine to say, do you know what? It's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that. If you do know the answer, then be honest in your response.
And a follow-up question to that, I would imagine that generally speaking, agency owners or leaders will be in two sort of general pots. One will be naysayers, and some will be and skeptics, and sort of pushing down the line of, this is a human business, it's never going to work, and all that, and causing some degree of frustration with the teams below them that maybe are seeing the competition utilizing certain parts to the advantage. But then there's also, equally as dangerous or as annoying to their teams, the ones that want to adopt every little shiny thing, every Instagram reel that they see. This is just going to revolutionize your world and all that. And I imagine, well, am I right in saying that as a leader, you kind of have to identify which one of those two you are, and then put safeguards, or at least expect the resistance from the team,
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you can do as a leader is use the energy that exists in the team. So if you've got some members of the team who are super enthusiastic, and I get what you're saying, sometimes you might need to rein them back in a little bit. If they come up with 10 ideas, then maybe give them 2 to play with, rather than all 10 at the same time. But if you've got that energy, then use it. So capitalize on the energy that's there. And then the other thing is use the influential voices that are within your team. It doesn't always have to be you. And in fact, there's a lot of benefit that it isn't you. But if you have got influential, enthusiastic voices in your teams, then use those to help influence those who are less confident or those who don't want to get on board. And that might include you. So if it's you that's kind of thinking, I'm not sure about this AI business, I'm really not convinced, then maybe use a couple of members of your team to start piloting, to start playing, to start using AI in small areas of the agency, and then kind of use that emergent approach and say, actually, end of month 1, end of month 2, there's some really great results here. Actually, this is quite interesting. So it might not be other members of your team. It might be you that needs to be convinced. But if you've got team members who are already there, then absolutely use them.
We've been sort of speaking around the psychology of the business leader quite a bit. And clearly there are different kinds of business leaders, some process-driven, some shiny things-driven. But I'm imagining the situation where, as a business leader, if the processes have been in my head and I'm the guy that people ask for everything, I'm the decision maker, and I start delegating or automating these processes, I can imagine that could be quite threatening to the leader of the business as well. Is that a common challenge you see?
When we're dealing with organizations that are founded, particularly where the founding member is still within the organization, maybe they're still the director of the organization, what we see very often is that connection between the individual and the organization. And with that comes a lot of emotion, there's a lot of heart there. So, if we take the leadership school from a personal perspective, I set the leadership school up. I'm the sole director here. And so there are decisions that need to be made within the organization that I can find quite tricky because I'm used to being the expert. I'm used to being the person that everybody comes to. I'm used to overseeing every project. I'm used to knowing exactly what's going on in the organization. And if I'm beginning to lose that through an automated AI process, then potentially some of my power, some of my identity is shifting. And that's what the word empower means. Empower means literally to give my power away. And it's one of those words that I think we use a little bit too easily in leadership. We talk about you must empower your people. And it is absolutely a great thing to do, but I don't think everybody really clocks what that means. It means I am giving my power away. The thing that we always talk to founders about, and the approach that I use on a personal basis, is to think about which hat am I wearing? If I need to make a decision, which hat am I wearing? So for me, I have the hat as the founding director of the leadership school. I also wear the hat as a working practitioner, and I also wear my personal Sharon hat. And so when I'm making a decision, I literally think about, okay, if I'm making that decision as director and founder of the leadership school, what's the decision that I would make? If I'm making that decision as a working practitioner within the leadership school, what decision would I make? And if I'm making that decision as me on an individual personal basis, what decision would I make? And very often the decision is different. But it means that having separated them out, I can then make the decision that is right in that individual situation. Sometimes I go with it's right for the organization. If it's right for the client, then that's is the trump card for me. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I go with a different decision. But the important thing is that I'm doing it in an informed way. And at the end of it, I know why I've made that decision.
What would be red flags for leaders? So I'm a leader. I'm an estate agency owner. What sort of thought processes would I have that are fairly likely to be a red flag that I'm thinking about it wrong?
If there is any sense that I am moving from self-interest to self-obsessed, so self-interest is great. Okay. As a leader, you need self-interest in order to be able to equip yourself to perform at your best. So self-interest, great. But if there is a sense that I'm beginning to move along that spectrum into self-obsession, then that's a red flag. Because if you are doing that, then the chances are you're going to make decisions that are not right for your agency or for your team or for your client. So that would be the first one. The second one, and this is true of any wicked issue, and is just as true for AI, is if you think you've cracked it. So at the point where you go, hey, sorted, got this cracked, okay, that would be a red flag. Okay, just be really careful with that one. And don't we all want those moments of joy? So definitely celebrate. But that would be my second one. The third one would be, and we use the analogy of running a marathon. So the third one is about if you're not taking your people with you. So imagine that you're a marathon runner and you've kind of been in training for a while. Maybe you've been thinking about this AI thing for quite a while, and you've got it sussed in your mind, and you've gone off at 100 miles an hour and you've run your marathon and you've come back and you're kind of having your recovery snack afterwards. Some of your people might still be in training. Some of them might still be putting their trainers on. Some of them might just be going past the first mile marker. So that would be my third watch out. If you are streaking ahead, but your people and your clients are not with you, because obviously your clients might not be happy with this AI thing. So, and this takes patience, particularly if you're an entrepreneur. And we see this with a lot of our clients. They're amazing, incredible people, but they're going a little bit too fast. So if you feel that that's happening, then just slow your pace a little bit. So those would be my top 3 red flags.
Those were really good. Can you say them as bullet points, Sharon? Because people are going to want to make notes.
Can I remember them? So the first one is if you sense that you're going from self-interest to self-obsession. The second one is if you think you've got it cracked. If you're going, aha, I got this sorted. That would be the second watch out. And then the third one is if you are running at pace and you're not taking your people or your clients with you.
Splendid. That was a much better summary than I would have cobbled together. Thank you. Just rewinding slightly, I think there's a couple of other things, 3 other things you said that are worth summarizing here before we move on. Asking on your employees' behalf, what's in it for me, or asking them what's in it for me. Doing that explicitly rather than implicitly, just assuming that they've figured out that better for the business means better for them. I'm so guilty of doing that. So that's a really good point. I love the definition of empowering as giving away power. And I think doing that consciously and joyfully is a really good prompt. And the last thing that you said, being conscious of what hat I'm wearing. Am I the founder in this particular decision? Am I doing the role of an employee in this particular thing? Or am I just Martin and making a decision from that point of view?
Yeah, and recognizing that all 3 are legitimate. No one of those is any more legitimate than the other.
So moving on now, I'd like to step into what good change management looks like. And I want to give you an example of how we did it poorly, and then you can tell me what we did wrong. We had an employee who wanted to do a bigger and better job. And we said to them, great, let's automate your old job. And when that's done, let's move you on to the next thing. And what I touched on this earlier, they found it really difficult to let go of the old thing, even though they didn't want to be doing it anymore. They wanted to be doing bigger and better, but we made the mistake of not defining the bigger and better, making the bigger and better real before asking them to let go of the old thing. And it just didn't work. So I've probably answered my own question there, but I'm sure you can fill in the dots.
And I think that scenario that you've described, Martin, is a really common one, and for all of the best reasons, for positive intent. Let's automate old job. Let's give you something new and exciting to do. In the topic of AI, we don't always know what that new and exciting is going to be. So I think that is the difference about AI. Historically, I might have said to you, I don't want you to be doing A anymore. I want you to be doing B now. And it would have been quite clear. Whereas now I think because there are so many possibilities, and possibilities that didn't even exist last week, last month, are now emerging. So I think that does feel different. And so what you're describing is this transition piece. So there are 3 stages to transition. Part 1, letting go of the old. Okay. And like we've touched on already, sometimes that's about letting go of comfort zone stuff. Part B is the neutral zone before you get to part C, which is the new exciting stuff. And I think this is really common that people forget, is this neutral zone in the middle. And sometimes we describe it like jelly because it's not clear, it's not clean, it's often messy. It's this kind of limbo space. As human beings, we don't tend to like uncertainty. We like to know when things are certain, even if it's not the news we want to have. We can deal with that. We can deal with bad news much better than uncertainty in general. So I'm in this kind of middle limbo zone that might feel a little bit uncomfortable for me because I don't know and you don't know what the answers are. The way to use that opportunity is to play. Use this as a playground. So rather than saying, okay, Sharon, I'm going to automate your old role, not quite sure what your new role looks like, but hang on in there for a minute, because that's not going to engage me as an employee. But if you were to frame it and if you were to say to me, okay, Sharon, for the next, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, whatever, we're going to play and we're going to use this time creatively, that can be quite liberating because it gives me a clear framework in which to play. So that might be about, okay, well, let's try this. Let's try that. What if you did some of this? If you wanted to do that, what new skills might you need? What training might you need? If we were to take the agency in a slightly different direction, what might that look like? So you use this as an exploratory time and to be really clear, we're not making any decisions. Okay, we're playing here. So it's not a case of, well, the first thing you try, Sharon, if that works, then we're going to stick with that. We're going to play. And what tends to happen when you give people that liberation within a framework. So this is not, I'm just going to cut you loose and you can go and do anything. This is within a clear parameter. And that might be a time parameter, that might be parts of the agency, that could be, that might be have a play in marketing, that could be have a play in client engagement, that could be have a play in a new product, that whatever that might be. But people tend to respond really positively to this being a creative space as long as there is a parameter around it. Cutting it completely loose tends to be too scary for people, but put a parameter around it, give people permission to play and then leave them to it. Back off, go away, literally let people play and the results can be absolutely amazing. So I think that would be the bit that I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting. What struck me as you were talking is because of the personality I am, I see structure as death. And so I just assume nobody needs any structure. And of course, the opposite is true. Even if it's saying sort of ring fencing this play area as a safe zone, that's a structure that we fail to put in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And as part of that, you also ring fence what is not play zone. So if there is an area that's just too high risk, too high reputational risk, or too financially risky, then you would be saying to me, okay, Sharon, you can play here, you can't play over here. And leaders sometimes talk about, well, it's safe to fail. I tell my team it's safe to fail. And what we would say is, okay, that's amazing, that's fantastic, but safe to fail in which areas? So put a parameter around where it's safe to fail and anywhere where it isn't safe to play.
I find this fascinating. This is so good because it's such a broad topic. It feels like you're either tech savvy or dying, or about to become obsolete, and that's very daunting. I love the accepting that that it is unknown, that nobody knows, that nobody at all knows. Not the guy on Instagram. Nobody knows. They have some ideas. People are trying things, but nobody knows. And when you know that nobody knows, then you can also accept that when you're expecting your team to cross the Red Sea with you as if you were Moses, that you're not Moses. You can't expect it to be done on faith alone. And therefore, you're going to have to give them something. And that's where those guardrails and that kind of framework to play and everything is wonderful. It really has clicked for me. I got to say that. I know this is not really a question, but thank you, Sharon. I think the pennies dropped for me on this.
I think it's a great observation. And the thing I would add to that, Alfredo, is that traditionally in change, and with all due respect, what traditionally has happened is that a leader appoints a project team and they have a Gantt chart and there's milestones and swim lanes, and it says, oh, in 6 months we're going to do this, and in a year's time we're going to do this, and in 3 years' time we're going to do this, and it's all color coded and it looks amazing on the screen, and they print it off and you put it on the wall. And life is not like that anymore. Okay, you can't predict what all of those milestones are going to look like. But equally, as a leader, you've got to provide something. You've got to provide some guide rails for your team. So taking an emergent approach, saying, okay, well, let's take this next step. In the next month, we're going to do this. And then let's pause and check in with each other and go, okay, how did that feel? Oh, well, actually, I thought it was going to be quite tricky, but it went easier than we thought. Or I thought it was going to be easier, or I thought we were going to get better results, but we did okay. Each time, emergent approach, and then you can decide what's the next step to take, and then what's the next step to take. But it does go back to what we said at the beginning, where you've zoomed out, so you know the direction you're heading in, you know what it is that you're seeking to achieve, even if you're not exactly sure how you're going to get there yet.
I want to talk about sort of how that actually works out in a small agency and move on to that. But before we do, sorry, I've got this summary obsession, but I really like the ABC that you enumerated there. A, let go of the old way. B, carve out a neutral zone and play in that area, but ring fence it and make it a specific kind of zone. And then C, move on to the new and exciting once that emerges. That framework would have helped us for sure.
Yeah. And sorry, Martin, but just to be clear, that is not my framework. So that's William Bridges' transitions framework. So I just need to give credit to William Bridges.
William Bridges, copyright. In this podcast, Alfredo and I have been completely open about the fact we don't know what we're doing, and we're trying to explore it with the help of guests and feedback. And I think that's an interesting approach, but it's one that inside a business can also cause anxiety within the team when the leader says, I don't know, I'm just winging it. Have you seen that happen? And what are the pros and cons of that?
So I guess I would say just be careful with your language slightly. As a leader, I think it's absolutely okay to talk about we are co-creating this. Saying I'm winging it, you might not want to quite go that far. But I think it is okay to say, okay, we know the destination, we know what we want to achieve. As an agency, we want to be, famous for these things. So, and Martin, this, having, because I know you've done this work at Kyero, having a strong reason why. Like, why does your estate agency exist? What is it that makes you different from other agents? What's your USP? So having that compelling reason why unites your team together. And then I think it is okay to say, I don't have all the answers as a leader. There was a piece of work done by Daniel Goleman a while ago, and him and his team created 6 different leadership styles. And the one leadership style that has the most positive correlation to positive culture within an organization is what he calls visionary. And visionary leadership is about setting that vision, but not then setting every step to get there. So you as a leader set the vision, you agree that vision, that reason why with your team. And then you say to your team, all right, how are we going to get there? Let's co-create it. And within your agency, you will have some amazing skills and knowledge and experience. But there is also a point where you have to be honest and say, we don't have the knowledge for this. We want to bring in an expert into this particular part of AI because we don't know, or we want to go and talk to another agency that has done it, or we want to listen to this amazing podcast, or so not being afraid to ask for help and to say, actually, we don't know how to do it. And the thing with AI is because everybody's trying to work it out, chances are somebody else has already made some of those mistakes. So as a leader, kind of put your pride away and pinch with pride. If somebody else has made those mistakes, then learn from them. You don't need to make them yourself. So I think that's the difference. It's slightly repositioning rather than saying, I'm winging it. Sitting with your team and going, okay, we've got this shared vision. We've got this reason why. We know why we're here. Let's co-create how we're going to get there and what role AI can play in helping us to achieve that, particularly going back to something you said earlier about where it can bring more joy. Where can AI make our lives easier and enable us to have more fun and enjoyment?
That's a really important distinction, I think, rather than going, hey, I'm winging everything, to say, listen, I know where we're going. It's over there. I'm not entirely sure how to get there. Let's figure this out.
And there is no map, right? There's no ordnance survey map that you can kind of go, here's one I prepared earlier. So be honest about that.
So with agents listening to this right now and they're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, what's the one thing they should do?
The first thing I would say is use the brilliant skills and knowledge that you have already got within your team. So very often we work with organizations, particularly organizations that are client facing, and they're demonstrating amazing skills externally. And what they forget to do is use those skills internally. So what I'm talking about here are things like curious questions. If you run an estate agent, then you know how to use curious questions with your clients, okay? You have got amazing members of your team who are used to looking externally. So use all of those skills, use that knowledge, and then project it internally. So this isn't necessarily about always learning new skills and knowledge. It's about better using what we've already got. So if you think about those curious questions that you might ask a client, let's ask those questions to ourselves, and what is it that you want to achieve? What's your budget? What's your timescales? All of those questions, why is this important to you? Using those questions internally can help you identify where you are now and where you want to be. So questions like, where are our strengths in the team? Let's be honest, where are our weaknesses? Okay, and then who do we know that can help us with our gaps or our weaknesses? So using all of those curious questions can help you identify, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And then, as I say, you take an emergent step-by-step approach to get there.
Thanks, Sharon. That seems like the perfect place to leave the episode. It's been mind-blowing and eye-opening. Thank you. We started this episode iterating on the 3 assumptions we made at the beginning of the series. And I think, Sharon, you've helped us see a 4th and possibly a 5th one, that the psychology of the leader is just as important. And that, in turn, will impact the psychology and the culture in the business. And it's the people that will determine whether this particular change works or doesn't work, get traction or dies in the ditches. Alfredo, how about you? What's your takeaway from this episode?
From this episode, I'm taking away that, well, many things. Overarching thing, I think, from like my advice to an agent listening to this is that if you do nothing else, stay AI curious. That's just going to park that thought there, because you don't have to know the answers. You just have to be open to them when they're presented to you. The second thing I'm taking away, and I love this because it really applies to most agencies that I know, it's not a good thing to be the AI forward agency that does everything's AI and everybody's tech and everybody's it's like a cult, or the sort of old school, we're human, we're never going to use AIs, and everybody that you recruit agrees with you, and that is real value in having different opinions within the team. But it's only valuable if you're willing to accept them and listen to them, and I think that gives you balance. And I think balance in a world that's crazy and where everything's changing so much, I think that's a unique asset, not a thing against it. Don't be thinking you got to get rid of those people that aren't AI positive people or anti-AI, whichever way that is. And then the final thing I've taken away is addressing the what's in it for me element on the head openly, not secretly like, they just care about themselves. I want to kill these agents. Really just kind of address it. What would be a benefit to you with these things we're doing? And then finally accepting that the new role doesn't exist yet because we don't know what that is. And you can't motivate, or you got to accept that your team is going to be unsettled at the very least at the uncertainty of get off this boat and get on that new boat. We don't know where it's going yet, but we'll find out when we get there. That's not great for people that have mortgages, kids in schools, and mouths to feed. For most people, even people that like change are nervous about that. And I think just creating that thing that Sharon was talking about of setting like the experimental areas that have the sort of where you can play with it, that means that you can start adopting change bit by bit, rather than it just is huge. It's all going to be amazing, or we'll all be out of work in 3 weeks. And I think that addresses a reality of the human condition of uncertainty. No, I mean, I like change, but not if it means I can't pay my mortgage and my kids are not going to eat. So it's all within reason. That's really, for me, that's the full 360 of the whole season. And I think Sharon's done an amazing job at putting it in perspective for us.
Thank you, Sharon. That was brilliant. Is there anything you want to add, or any question I should have asked you that I didn't ask?
No question that occurs to me. I think the only other thing would be something about enjoying it. I think AI is one of those topics that people hold so heavily and with such weight. There's something about acknowledging, yes, okay, it is big and it's complex, but it doesn't have to be weighty, and it doesn't mean that it has to suck enjoyment. Where can we find joy and play and celebrate using AI, rather than it being something to be wary of or concerned about?
Nice. I like that. Thanks again, Sharon. Join Alfredo and I next week as we endeavour to summarise the entire series. No doubt we will be using AI to help us do that.